Introduction to kubectl. What is kubectl? Kubectl is the official command line tool provided by Kubernetes for interacting with Kubernetes clusters. Purpose of kubectl. Kubectl serves as a Swiss Army knife for Kubernetes, allowing users to perform various operations such as deploying applications, inspecting and managing cluster resources, and troubleshooting issues. Overview on kubeconfig. Kubectl relies on configuration file known as kubeconfig. This file contains information about cluster, user, and contexts. Within kubeconfig, contexts are used to define cluster, user, and namespace combinations. Users can switch between contexts to interact with different clusters or namespaces. The default location for kubeconfig is typically in home directory at /kube/config on Linux and macOS. On Windows, it's usually at %userprofile %\kube\config. Users can specify a custom location by setting the kubeconfig environment variable. The default location for the kubeconfig file is within the home directory at /kube/config. This configuration file contains details about clusters, contexts, a combination of cluster, namespace, and user, and the current context, indicating the active configuration. To explore the functionality of kubectl with kubeconfig, let's temporarily relocate the file to the /tmp directory and attempt to use kubectl. As expected, an error occurs because kubectl searches for the kubeconfig in the default location, which is now absent due to the relocation. To address this, we can specify a custom directory for kubeconfig by setting the kubeconfig environment variable, providing the path to the configuration file. For restoration, let's unset the kubeconfig environment variable and return the kubectl configuration file to its original location within the home directory. Let's examine the fundamental flow of interactions that occur when executing commands with kubectl. Local machine, this is where you run the kubectl command line tool. Kubectl CLI, the command line interface for interacting with a Kubernetes cluster. Kubernetes API, the API server that exposes the Kubernetes API, responsible for managing the entire cluster. Kubernetes controller, part of the Kubernetes control plane that ensures the desired state of the cluster matches the actual state. Kubernetes cluster, the collection of nodes, physical or virtual machines, running containerized applications and the control plane components. Container registry, a place where container images are stored. Examples include Docker Hub, Google Container Registry, or an internal registry. Container image, the packaged application and its dependencies, stored in the container registry. Interaction flow. The user interacts with kubectl on their local machine, sending commands to the Kubernetes API server. The Kubernetes API server communicates with controllers to make changes to the desired state of the cluster. The controllers ensure that the actual state of the cluster converges towards the desired state. The Kubernetes cluster schedules and runs containerized applications using images stored in the container registry. In this tutorial we learnt 1. What is kubectl? 2. Purpose of kubectl. 3. What is kubeconfig? 4. Interaction flow between kubectl and Kubernetes cluster. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content.